I've gone through seasons where I was burnt out but had no clue until I got an opportunity to rest.
When you go away and you rest and go on vacation and then you come back and you're still exhausted, I think that's a time to pause.
I think every single person who's listening to this right now is at stake.
Welcome back to the Rethinking Youth Ministry Podcast. My name is Ashley, and I am so excited to be hanging out with my friends today because we're going to be talking about something that I am so sure will be helpful to you no matter where you are in your journey. We're going to be talking about burnout. Whether you're experiencing it, approaching it, or recovering from it, I think you're going to get something amazing out of this conversation today. But before we jump in, I want you to meet the beautiful minds we have around the table today. To my right, we have the one, the only,
Charlie Condor. Yeah. I like, is she going to say my name? I wasn't really sure. Or maybe it was Shane. I didn't know. My name is Charlie, and I have been serving students in either the classroom or the church for 25 years. This is my 25th year of doing that. I know. And it's so wild that I'm still 21. No, just kidding.
Yeah, you are.
So I've been serving students in the context of the ministry and a classroom for 25 years this year. And this is such a needed conversation because I've actually burned out before. It manifested in a physical way in my life through my health. And I know burnout can show up in a lot of different ways, but for me, it was very physical. So not only walking through recovery of my heart, it was like a recovery of my body too.
That's so good.
So here at Orange, I get to serve as an Orange student specialist, and I also get the privilege of being a burnout coach. So walking alongside other leaders who have burned out or trying to recover from burnout, it's just a beautiful space to hold for leaders. And so I get the privilege of doing that.
I bet you are so good at that too. And that kind of coach is so needed. I don't hear that very often.
I believe that I'm good at it because of my experience. And I hate that I experienced it. And I wish I'd have known what I know now to kind of prevent it. And that's what I want to do for young leaders who are already feeling frazzled with the pressure of like leadership and all the things that they can't change. And then the next thing you know, your heart's starting to sour and you become cynical and maybe a little disillusioned with the church. And I don't know, I think it's a beautiful ministry to be a part of.
I'm so glad you're on this episode,
awesome.
Charlie.
Thanks, friend. And to my right, I have my friend
Shane Sanchez.
Is it fun to
Hey.
introduce yourself?
It's weird a little bit, but
okay.
it was fine. Yeah, it's good. It's good. Yeah, my name is Shane, and I'm a part of the Orange Students team. I am the director of special projects, and I've been a youth pastor. I've been involved in youth ministry in both volunteer and staff roles for I think it's 15 years now, which is wild to stop and think about. But I would say I've had a couple different phases and experiences of burnout throughout my ministry tenure. I've also watched it happen to people, and I would love to help prevent it for people moving forward. I don't think you have to go through it. I don't think it's a badge of honor or a mark of accomplishment within ministry. I think there's a different way to do it, and I'm really hopeful as to how the next generation of leaders is approaching it, because in a lot of ways, I think they may have a bit of a healthier perspective. So, and to my right, if you circle all the way around the table, is the one and only.
What's going on? My name is Matt Mano. I'm a Next Gen pastor at New Life Fellowship Church in Queens. I've been in my role as a Next Gen pastor for the last 3 years. Before that, I was a youth pastor for 6 years. And I've been serving youth ministry for 23 years. So, man, that feels like a long time.
Yeah.
And I too, I've gone through seasons where I felt really burnt out, where I wondered if I was burnt out.
Yeah.
And seasons where I was burnt out but had no clue until I got an opportunity to rest.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to diving into this conversation.
Yeah.
I love what you just said. I had no clue until I had an opportunity to rest. So good. Okay, Charlie, you mentioned something in your intro. You talked about going through a season of burnout and how it manifested physically. For some people listening, they may not be aware that they are burnt out, and the way that it manifests in anyone and everyone is different. And so what are, in your experience, coaching people, and maybe in your experiences, what are some of those signs and symptoms? And
I think when you sleep or nap and you can't get enough of it, that should be a sign that it's not just rest that you're needing. I think there's moments when we do not allow our bodies to be heard. understanding your body and understanding like who you are and being really self-aware, I think could be a big marker in stopping burnout, or at least identifying, oh my gosh, I'm headed towards it.
Yeah.
You know, when you go away and you rest and go on vacation and then you come back and you're still exhausted, I think that's a time to pause. Like just hit pause and be like, what's causing this? Because that's a huge sign of burnout. I hear pastors all the time going, well, I'm going to go on vacation. Everything's going to be great. I did 26 camps, 2 mission trips, and all the things this summer. And then, but I'm going to go on vacation and be ready for kickoff. And the reality is, but are you? Right? Did you really rest?
Yeah, that's good.
Would you say in most of the people you coach, that's true?
Yeah, because they think when they go away, right, then they're going to come back rejuvenated and on fire and super excited. But the fact is, it's maybe not just rest, it's a switch in rhythm and understanding that the rhythm has to change so that you can become healthy again.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. What about you
That's
guys?
good.
What would you say? Either are signs or symptoms you've experienced or you've seen other people experience?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a change in motivation. Like, Charlie, I know you mentioned the idea of you just need to take a nap. And I mean, I love naps. Like, my favorite time of day is when my son is napping.
Nap time.
And I also nap. But like just a change in the excitement and enthusiasm I would feel over something I enjoy. I'm not talking about the parts of the job that like, this is terrible, I don't like doing it. I'm talking about the parts that would normally have me pumped and ready to go. And all of a sudden I'm struggling to even get moving towards something like that. That for me is a huge red flag and lets me know I need to pay attention to something that's going on within myself. And I love that you talked about the idea of rhythms, because in my view, one of the best safeguards when it comes to burnout, and in terms of the way that I've experienced getting beyond it, is checking my rhythms to make sure that my rhythms are actually serving me and not the other way around. To kind of keep me away from that stage of being so burnt out that like I just need to unplug from everything for a lot longer than a week.
Well, and I think rhythms provide grace where a schedule feels so rigid, right? But when you can produce a healthy rhythm to life, you get to notice, oh, this is a good marker, this is a negative marker. But sometimes shifting to a rhythm is hard.
Yeah. I agree with both of the things that were stated here. I think I've experienced both of those in different times. I remember, gosh, this feels really honest. I remember watching baptisms in our student ministry years ago. This is when I was a youth pastor in Arizona, and waiting to feel a certain way and realizing I wasn't feeling, I felt numb. And I remember watching and thinking after, what is wrong with me? Because like what's going, and I was just worn out. I was burnt out. I was tired. And even though I cared about all of it, the same way that I didn't have the capacity. I had filled myself beyond my capacity already, that I didn't even have the capacity left to feel and be present in that moment. So I definitely think, Matt, what you're saying is important. And I would just classify that as numbness. I think if you're starting to feel numb toward the ministry you get to be a part of, that could be a sign of something. Charlie, along with you, I agree. Physically, I experienced physical symptoms of burnout too. For me, it was a panic attack, my first and hopefully only, that wound up being a gateway that helped me understand my own mental and physical health differently than I ever had before. But I also can look back and go, that was probably rooted in a lot of the difficult things I had been carrying as a youth pastor and had walked through with families and students that I hadn't done the work to process. And I think eventually that led to burnout. And then the last thing I'll say, if I can add something to what each of you are saying, I think cynicism is a really great indication of whether or not you're getting close to burnout. I think the more and more cynical you are, and I get it, we were all hired and or asked to volunteer in the positions that we're a part of because we're really good at being critical. We're good at seeing the small details and paying attention and making things better. But cynicism is what bleeds into the point of you're not just being critical in the hope of improving something. You're being cynical at the hope of tearing something down. And I think those are two very different realities. And as soon as you're in that cynical frame of mind, a lot can begin to unravel.
I don't think I've ever thought of the idea of being cynical, maybe because I'm a New Yorker and we're just cynical about everything all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But no, but I think I think with that one in particular, you have to be careful because some people just approach things through that particular lens. And so I don't want people to hear that. And then all of a sudden, well, I'm cynical. That must mean that I'm burnt out. So like, is there, what I would wonder is there a category of that maybe should raise your attention towards this might be a sign of burnout? Like, if it's just part of who you are, well, then maybe that's not something extra to pay attention to. But if this is if this is a new thing, something that you're not used to, something that's not normally how you do things, then maybe you want to start to pay attention to it.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm glad you're clarifying that. I think cynicism can get a bad rap, especially in the church. Oftentimes we feel like we have to put a smile on and be positive about everything because that's what Christians do, right? But I think the reality is that actually keeps us from confronting some of the things that through cynicism, in a healthy way, we need to confront and make better. I would say, to clarify, that if your cynicism is causing you to fall further into bitterness, that's when it becomes an issue, because I really think it's bitterness that is at the root of burnout if you're caught up in cynicism.
So you're saying you can't do ministry in the bitter barn?
No, I've never heard that. What do you know about barns? You're from New York City, Matt Mano.
There's a grocery store that I shop at. It's got a picture of a barn on the outside.
That's good. That's good.
So what would you all say? I mean, it's not a surprise to anyone sitting in this circle that youth ministry requires a lot of somebody.
Yep.
What are some practical strategies either you've implemented or you've experimented with or you've coached somebody to help prevent burnout?
Sabbath.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
A rhythm of Sabbath. And when I say Sabbath, I'm talking 24 hours every week. Not like,
No.
oh, I'm going to take 2 hours out of a day. No, like a time that you guard, protect, and you're intentional about keeping every week for stopping all work, resting, delighting in the good things that God has given you, and contemplating the goodness of God in your life. Not to come up with ministry strategies, not to come up with sermon illustrations, just a time of a rhythm of intentional weekly rest is one of the easiest ways that you can sort of help prevent burnout from kind of taking hold of you. So, I mean, I'm a big advocate for that. I do it every week. Actually, in my church, we say that there's one surefire way to get fired, and that is to not have a weekly Sabbath.
That's good. But along the lines of Sabbath, I think a lot of youth pastors feel like a concierge youth pastor, right? Because we're available all the time for everyone, and every parent has our number, and anyone can text me. And so as a coach, I would say in your emails, you need to put an out of office and use the word, hey, I'm Sabbathing, because it carries a little different weight when a parent sees that or someone needs you. And now your cell phone has the little where you can put, I'm driving, but you could change that to, hey, I'm Sabbathing today.
Yeah.
Get back to me in 24 hours.
Yeah. And that speaks to the idea of protecting it. Because if you can set that up, but if you don't guard it and protect it, anyone and everyone, the demands of your ministry will overtake you. And the fact of the matter is, like, God has got everything. Everything will be fine. If you step out for 24 hours, things will not fall apart. Everything will be just fine.
Can we speak to that though? Because that's an ego-based ministry where a lot of burnout comes from, right? When I always have to be there, I always have to be on. I'm the one answering the questions. Like, it is all about me.
I was going to say, but Matt, the devil doesn't take a day off. So what do we do in that situation? But it's that same thing. I mean, it's all caught up in the same mentality.
Yeah, but I would even say about the ego thing, there are some situations where, like, it's not an ego thing as much as it's a mandate from on high.
I was just going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Especially from young leaders. Like, you're saying this as someone who's the boss. Like, you're in charge saying that.
I mean, I have a boss though. So
I get that, but you're like 25 years into this. Like, you have somebody who's 1 or 2 years in, and their leadership doesn't guard Sabbath the way that you just explained it, or there is an expectation for them to be present.
Haven't we all worked for that guy?
Right? That was the
We've all worked for that guy.
That was the alternative side of the coin that I was going to raise. Was that very thing?
Yeah.
It's like, at the risk of sounding cynical, I don't know.
Are you burnt out?
No, I feel great. This is healthy cynicism, I think. Matt, you can tell me the difference.
You're wrong.
At the risk of sounding cynical, I want to speak to the youth pastor listening that doesn't feel like there's an option.
Yeah.
Because I think that is so many of us, but I know that that's been me. I mean, I worked at a church. We had 5 services every weekend. I was giving at least 4 talks on many of those weekends. Saturday and Sunday are gone. You're still like supposed to take Friday off, but you have to get ready for things. And then the rest of the week, obviously you have volunteers that need leading and shepherding. You have student things that come up. You have families that are asking you to step into really difficult situations alongside them. And it just doesn't really feel like you have an option. So I want to acknowledge the fact that youth ministry can feel that way sometimes.
Yeah.
And to sit here and be like, well, just do this or that or whatever, it doesn't always feel like it's in our control. So,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, what I can say is, thankfully, we got a new lead pastor who changed some things, who saw the rhythms and went, this isn't healthy, who killed Saturday nights. Thank you, Lord. No offense to anybody who does Saturday nights, but they were exhausting to us. And who just made some adjustments for the health of the staff and boldly said it. This is for the health of our staff.
Yep.
So there is part of me that thinks if you're in one of those situations that feels just completely out of your control, then there may be some bigger fish to fry. I don't know what that means, Charlie, but
The bigger fish to fry?
yeah, but you know what I mean.
I got you.
But there may be some bigger questions to ask yourselves, or even some more introspective things to consider as you're thinking about your future in youth ministry.
Yeah,
So
because
good.
what you outlined is really interesting, Shane. You know, you said you've got your 2 Saturday services, all weekend is gone. You might have a day off, but you're using that day to prepare for what's coming
Yeah.
at you the next few days.
Yeah.
It's so interesting to me that everything you named was about serving all the people you're expected to serve, and none of it was about you caring for yourself.
Yep.
And that is
Yeah.
the biggest
Yep.
thing that I would say. Like, you have
That's
these
good.
for
Yeah.
a leader in a setting like that one, what I would start asking is, are these expectations realistic
Yes.
in light of me not having any time to actually care for myself?
Yeah.
Because what is in me is what I bring to all of these settings that I'm being asked to show up to. And so, like, if I don't have time and space to care for myself, to care for my body, to connect with God in a deeper way,
Yep.
what exactly is it that I have to give?
Mm-hmm.
Because where do I have time to actually receive much of anything?
Yep.
And so I would say find a way to have that conversation first with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and then respectfully
Yep.
go and ask some questions of your senior leadership.
Well, and I think some of that comes from, as a young leader, not asking for one-on-ones. Like, that's a whole different system that we could talk about too. But asking for one-on-ones so that you can clarify what your
It's good.
need is, right?
It's good, Charlie.
Because a lot of times it's like, well, we go to staff meeting together. That's different. That's not a one-on-one conversation. But y'all, we have all been so guilty of, and what you said, of deeper relationship with God. We just work for God. I mean, that's just what we do. But being
With God.
being with God is like, man, I even catch myself all the time prepping for camps and doing my job and coaching other people. I will go weeks without ever sitting just with God.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, it's not reading scripture for something else or deep diving commentaries or whatever.
Yep.
But the question I think we should be asking is, why is it so hard?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have
'Cause-
answers,
Yeah.
No.
but
Because we often think, and this is my opinion, we often think that we're being judged by how much we produce.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like we're constantly living this thing, like I have to produce more and then I can be something more. And what God is saying is you are already something more,
Yep.
regardless of what you produce.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think Sabbath is a way of saying, God, I actually believe that and trust you.
That's so good, Matt.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
But can we also just say at the end of the day, this is a job.
Yeah.
Like, what you're doing at the church, I know it's this hard work, but they'll fire you and they'll replace you. But your relationship with God and your own health cannot be replaced.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I know that sounds really harsh. I am an 8 on the Enneagram, and I don't have a hard time saying that to people because I think a lot of people, oh no, it's so much more than that. And then this brokenness comes when they're no longer employed or they're let go, right?
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know, at some point, you can't replace yourself.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So you got to start caring for you first.
That's right.
I was listening to a different podcast this morning, although normally I only listen to the
How
Rethinking
d-
Youth
how
That's right.
Ministry
You
dare you.
podcast
only listen to this
on
one.
repeat all the time. But I was listening to this podcast and the guest said something about he wears baggy clothes so that he can separate the created from who he actually is. So he said, I know it's kind of an interesting analogy, but he said, if you wear tight clothes, sometimes it feels like it's hard to know the difference between your body and the clothes that you're wearing. So I wear baggy clothes to separate what the created world from my person and my identity is really where he was going. And it made me just stop and think about how caught up we can get in the things that we're creating, so much so that we can't separate the creation and the work that we're doing and the programs that we're putting together and the events that we're planning from who we are as human beings. And I really think so much of this burnout culture that we see is that you have a lot of leaders who can't separate who they are from what they're creating.
Yeah.
So maybe we just need to wear more baggy clothes. Saying that in the biggest shirt I've ever worn in my entire life.
So what would you say, I know you said Sabbath is a way to prevent burnout. Shane, Charlie, what are some practical strategies for preventing burnout?
Okay, I'm going to say this with a lot of confidence, but anyone listening needs to know I have full-on ADHD, and I actually think I broke out in hives the first time I ever did this. But silence and solitude, it is huge piece of posturing and a practice that we need to have in our regular rhythms. It is not easy. Please know the first time I ever took an entire silence day, I was in my 30s, right? And I wrote it out on a sheet of paper, like how to structure my silence time. Please, everyone laugh in your cars or wherever you're listening. But you have to know it's not always easy to do. But God, that practice of silence and solitude is so restorative. Like more people need to have that in their daily rhythms. Not daily, but yes, daily. I mean, some people daily. I think I really broke out in hives though, Ash. Like real hives.
Sense. It's
stressful.
There's a saying.
Why is it stressful?
Well, we live in such an overstimulated world that like that silence and solitude.
No, but I'm
helps strip
talking
that
about
away too.
guilt. There's like a guilt piece to it too. Like, oh, I just took the entire day to go sit in a hammock in the woods.
Because you're not being productive.
Because I'm not being productive. I'm not producing. I'm not. And
that
then
goes to what Matt was saying.
But then I'm not at home cooking dinner for my family. I'm not doing the mom stuff. Like, I don't know. I think we have to acknowledge that there is guilt associated with self-care, right? It's just the world we live in.
Yeah.
I hate it.
Especially since our jobs are often posited as we work for the good of other people.
Yeah.
And so if I'm taking time for me, how can I can't be doing something for somebody else. But again, like if you have nothing left to give because you empty yourself out and you're never being restored.
Was it monastatic practices, right? I saw that at, how do you say, is that
monastic?
How you say? Thank you. I saw that at a camp done really well this summer where, I mean, it was guided and every kid had something, but for an hour, these middle schoolers would sit around the lake and just be involved in silence and reading scripture. And I thought, I can't do that for an hour.
Yeah.
I mean, it took me, y'all, I'm not even kidding. The first time I did silence and solitude as a practice of restoration, I had to start with 10 minutes. And then I set a timer and I could do 20, right? Like I couldn't do a full day. And I know that sounds crazy, but I would challenge everybody to do something like that to see how it could be added into your rhythm. Wow.
Yeah. So like I forgot who said it, but the saying goes like this. We begin each day with silence, so God has the first word. And we end each day with silence, so God has the last word.
Come on, that's
I think
good.
I said that.
That was real good.
It was
Sorry,
me.
somebody. It was
It was,
definitely somebody.
I was like 12 or 13, so I don't expect you to
an old
remember.
dead guy, like one of those people.
How dare you? How dare you?
Okay, wait, Matt, can I ask a question? I love that. I think we live in a world where the first thing we do is pick up our phones.
Yep.
So how have you added that practice to your life?
Don't pick up your phone.
I know that seems easy, but
no, but seriously, like charge your phone someplace else.
Okay.
Like, and make an appointment, make it a point to do it, or use your phone to do it. There are apps that you can download.
Of course.
Like, I'm blanking on one right now, but there are apps you can download that will have timers in them that you set up for the idea of spending a certain amount of time in silence. You can even set it has a gong that plays. A very peaceful monastic gong that will play to help center you, to get you started in your silence, to end your time in silence. And here's the thing: you said you started in one place and then you went up to like 20 minutes.
Yeah,
that's great. If you start with 1 minute every day and persevere, fight through because it's going to be tough because it's so counter. Like think about even the way church is set up, right? Church is set up where we are constantly offering words.
Yes.
We sing songs, we say prayers, somebody preaches. The whole worship gathering is oriented around people talking.
Yeah.
This is around us saying, I'm actually not going to say anything.
Yep.
just, and again, and here's the key, not so that you can hear something from God. The point of silence and solitude is to simply be in God's presence.
Mm-hmm.
He may not say anything to you at all, but it's about being with him in his presence.
Yeah, that's good.
Uninterrupted by anything else. People
That's good.
people think when they have the measure of silence and solitude is about hearing from God, and I didn't, so it was a failure. If your bar is simply being in his presence, then
Yeah.
you can never fail.
I think a lot of this pressure that we feel, like we're talking about, the pressure to produce, the pressure to do more, the pressure to be everything to everyone in all places at all times. From my limited perspective, I think so much of that pressure is unique to us as American church leaders. I know that exists everywhere, but there's something about the American dream, if you will, that we've allowed to replace the true work of the ministry. And we've gotten caught up in this idea of bigger means better, more production means I'm more effective. And I'm not talking about, live production. I'm talking about just producing results. We live in a supersized nation. We live in a bigger, faster, better, stronger. And in so many ways, it's been really good. But if we're really, really honest, that doesn't always line up with the way of Jesus. And if we're supposed to be leading people toward the way of Jesus, I think the way that we lead as youth ministry leaders is going to have to look weirdly countercultural, weirdly low production at times, weirdly creating space for silence and solitude when the world around us is just running faster and faster. And I know that is difficult to do, but I've come to this place over the last few years, and I think the pandemic really forced us all to grapple with this, but to have to ask myself, okay, what am I willing to sacrifice in my journey with Jesus? Is it my ability to produce at a certain level, or is it my ability to have a healthy soul and a deep well for the ministry that I'm getting to do day in and day out?
And the question is, what is Jesus actually inviting us into?
Yeah.
Because if it's a life with God,
Yeah.
then your ministry will flow out of that life with God,
Yeah.
not the other way around.
Yep.
Like my life with God will flow out of me being available to my ministry 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like, I've heard people say all the time, my time studying for preparing sermons is my time with God.
Yep.
It's like, sure, you're spending time with God, no doubt. Like, I'm not taking away from that. But doing that for the sake of being able to communicate it is different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than I'm doing this for loving union between
Yes.
God and myself.
That's production based. I mean, if I feel like if the pressure that we're feeling working at a church or volunteering at a church that leads to burnout is because our church's success is more measured like a McDonald's branch success than it is like, I think, a first century outlook that Jesus had, or even what he called his disciples to. I think there's an issue. And I'm saying that as somebody who has worked at some of the largest churches in the country.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that it's all bad, but I'm saying you see a lot of burnout happen in the types of settings where people are held to that type of production level. And I don't know how healthy it is.
But can we talk about the youth worker who's also bivocational
Yeah.
by choice? I actually, right before this, I was answering an email and setting up a call with someone who financially had to make the choice that, okay, I'm going to be a youth pastor, but I'm also now, and they called it co-vocational. I've always called it bivocational. So whatever the language
cool.
is. But I know that production is big when you're in a large church, but man, when you're in a small church and you're everything, including the janitor,
Yeah.
and then you still have to go home and like milk cows or do whatever job. I always think about Dave. He milks cows and talks to me on the phone. But to go and do another job on
Yep.
top of it so that you can financially maintain like the call that you feel in your life, that guy, that gal, that person, my goodness, like burnout happens so fast. And I don't often know, I mean, we're talking about taking time away. Do they have time
Yep.
for it?
That's a great point.
Right?
I love that. So are there any practical strategies that aren't about Sabbath, silence, and solitude? Because I'm sitting here thinking those three things in general like are hard for me, and they might look different for me than they do for you. But I'm imagining I'm not the only one.
Yeah.
So I would love to continue like the practical stuff
Yeah.
here. Like what what does this look like in our daily rhythm? Maybe not
Yeah.
our weekly rhythm or,
Yeah. I've got a couple that come to mind. One, this is a bigger piece, but I think all ministry leaders, if they have access and can figure it out, need a counselor in their life. I think that is an important part of preventing, but also healing from burnout, is just having a person in that role to be able to process what you're carrying, what you're walking through. Ministry has some really unique hurts and pains. And I think having somebody that can process that with you in a healthy way is really critical and important. The second thing that I'll say, and Matt could help us link to this in the show notes maybe, but I practice a daily office, a rhythm from the one and only Pete Scazzaro, who I know Matt works with and knows well. But I put that rhythm in place in my office day. So I would actually show up to the office and I would shut my door for 30 minutes or so and do, my first part of the daily office. And then there's another rhythm for around lunchtime where you just kind of stop in the middle of your day and have a moment of reflection and prayer. And then before bed as well. But that's another rhythm that is an ancient practice that I think you can actually infuse into your workday. So even if it feels like, I don't know what I'm doing, it may be on the car ride where you're stopping, you're turning the radio off for 5 minutes and you're participating in the daily office.
I love that.
Besides your calendar, right, which I think is huge, and we all have phones and we can calendar our lives away, which I think we should calendar our lives a lot, because I calendar in my quiet time. No one can see me do that, can they? Sorry. My quiet time with God is like in my daily calendar, which I know probably seems weird, but I even mark off time to read something, to learn during the day. I think a big piece of helping with burnout is having an accountability partner, because ministry is very, very lonely. And that person doesn't have to be in ministry. It could just be a trusted voice who knows you. I have a really great friend, and she dies laughing every time I talk about burnout, because she's like, but you're the queen of burnout. So how do you help other people? Because you're like in the midst of it all the time. And I'm like, yes, but I also think I've become self-aware enough to notice it.
Yeah.
But man, get yourself someone that knows you, that you can sit with on the regular, and they can do a check-in with you. And what's so great, if you get that way with someone who just knows you, they can just glance at you and be like, you're going to need to take some time off this weekend, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And along those lines, just in terms of what's practical, be off when you're off.
Yes.
Like, just boundaries are so important. Because here's the thing, whether it's Sabbath or just like, you know what, my workday ends at 6 p.m. and I don't have anything on the schedule, then be off.
Yep.
Like, rest, find something you enjoy, go eat a good meal with some people, hang out with some friends, like have something going on in your life besides ministry. Because if ministry bleeds into every area of your life where you're constantly on all the time, of course, you're going to be burnt out very quickly if you don't have good, firm boundaries that you protect.
I see this happening a lot in smaller contexts, because you're one of two people on staff.
Yep.
And that's just really hard. So if you're that person, man, taking these scheduling ideas, the boundary ideas, and for the love of Pete, take a Sabbath, right? Like, to me, if you're one of two people on staff, Sabbath has to be an even higher value.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to ask you all a question. Whether this is a small church setting or a large church setting, I feel like there could be some youth ministry leaders listening who are like, great, thanks for all the practical advice. I can't.
Why? I would ask you why. What is keeping you from doing that?
Yeah. Okay. And I feel like we've processed through a good chunk of that side of things, but how do we help a youth ministry leader identify if maybe they're a part of an unhealthy culture or a toxic culture? Like, what are the indications of those types of things? Because I think that's an important part of the burnout conversation, is maybe there's a chance that so many youth workers are burning out because there may be some unhealthy staffs, cultures, whatever else. Sorry, I'm just saying the thing.
maybe, possibly, there might be a
I'm
toxic.
trying
We're like,
to
we
be
all
diplomatic.
know.
I'm trying to be diplomatic.
He's like,
okay?
I know that's true, but I'll act like I don't know.
Here's why. I believe in the church, and it's what I said earlier. I think we've in so many ways, and I can only really speak on behalf of the American church. We've gotten caught up in some of this flow over the last however many years, over the last century, and now we're sitting in 2023 after we had this hard reset moment of 2020. And we thought it was going to be a moment that nobody was ever going to burn out again, because we know how to be slow now. We know how to calm down now and like do all the healthy things. But then 3 years later, we're sitting here and we're right back to going, how many people can we get in seats? How many hours do I need to
Wait,
work
but
to
do you
accomplish
think
these
it's worse
things?
now? Because
It
I
feels
think-
that way sometimes.
Yeah, no, I'm with you, Shane. I think it's worse now.
So that's what I'm saying. I'm like, what would you all say to that youth worker who's sitting here and going, I'm feeling pressure on all sides? One, how do I identify if maybe something's not healthy in the culture I'm a part of? And two, what do I do?
I would say first, how do they react when you ask them or tell them that you need to rest?
Like your leaders is what
Like
you're
your
saying.
leaders, yeah.
Ah,
You go
okay.
have a conversation and you
that's
say, hey,
great.
like,
Phew.
you know, I'm not demanding anything. I'm just telling you, how do you guys feel about me having a weekly Sabbath? How do you guys feel about me taking a break to rest? How do you guys feel about me saying I am unavailable to you from a certain time every evening? And again, you're not demanding. You're simply going in to have a conversation to see what's possible for you. And how does your leadership react when you bring those things forward?
That's great, man.
Because if you're in a place where that's not part of the culture and you're asking to make that part of the culture for your own benefit, and they're telling you, no, absolutely not, we don't do that here, that might open your eyes to start looking at, well, maybe this is not the healthiest environment for me to be in right now. If you're telling me it's not okay that I go rest, or if I'm being accused of being unspiritual, not having enough faith, like if I'm being told that I'm weak because I need these things in my life so I don't burn out.
Wow.
So that would be one measure, I would say, if you
That's
want to
good.
see, like, how do they react when you ask them if these things are possible?
That's good.
But I know youth workers, and I'm not talking just one, and this is just in the last couple of months, who are being fired because they are not producing enough. We don't have enough kids coming to church. Where are all the families? And we're going to fire you if we don't see 30 more families by this date.
Yeah.
Can I be real straight with y'all? I would walk out right then. I'd be like, if you're putting that kind of pressure on me, but I know not everyone can do that. However, I think that's the reality for a lot of church leaders right now that are feeling pressure from the top down is, if you can't bring in this number, you're not going to have a job anymore.
Wow.
And that's tough.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Because when you go to senior leadership and you're saying, I need this, this, and this, and they're like, well, you're weak. You're not going to be able to produce, right? This isn't the right place for you then.
Yeah.
And
And that's awful.
it is terrible.
And it feels awful, but here's my question. And again, I'm just being fired is the worst. But if you get let go from a place that's unhealthy,
Mhm.
that's pulling you deeper into unhealth,
Yep.
that's not allowing you to be restored so you can actually bring forth something that flows from a place of a life with God,
Mhm.
then my question that I'm asking rhetorically is, are you better off?
Wow.
But you have to sit with that for a minute.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Right? As a
Yeah.
leader, you just got to kind of sit with that. And I
Yep.
think if you're listening and you're feeling this pressure of where are all the families, where are all the students, like sitting with this, is it healthy? Is it unhealthy? Like make a checklist or something,
Yeah.
because man, I just don't, that's not the work we've been called to.
And to be clear, I'm not advocating for anybody to go in and get fired.
For sure. Yeah.
Like, no, and not at all. And I'm also not saying like,
This is the turnover
this is-
episode, no longer the burnout episode.
just quit your job.
No.
But no, like that's not what I'm saying at all. I think it's an important thing to hold on to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
reality that, like, yeah, you're in a church now. Maybe you like it. Maybe you love it. But you're starting to see, like, maybe this is not the healthiest place.
Yep.
It's a hard conversation that we have to sometimes have with ourselves
Yeah.
and with the people in our lives, your significant other, your family, whatever it is, to figure out, like, what is the way forward for me, because I'm maybe seeing this is not the best place. And if you
Yeah.
can, so at bare minimum, when you show up the next day, you can do it from a place of integrity. Like at bare minimum,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
you're
Yes.
honest with yourself about where you are and what the realities are of what's going on.
That's good.
So good.
I'll say too,
Mhm.
as we talk about this, I don't put the blame on lead pastors. I don't put the blame on executive pastors. I don't put the blame on, whoever the youth pastor is accountable to. Because I think in a lot of situations, the senior leadership are under the same types of pressures, just from a different audience.
Mhm.
And so I really think what this boils down to, like when it comes to burnout, I can say in my own life, what it really has been is, one, there was an unhealthy cynicism that I experienced in my early 20s when I burned out the first time. And I just thought, everything is stupid and I know how to do it right. And it was just this unhealthy cynicism that led me to go, I'm done with this whole thing. That was me. That was a heart thing. I think the other side of this is the other root of burnout may just be our motivation. I think oftentimes we're allowing the wrong things to motivate us as to what we actually think is productive, healthy, effective ministry. And if we have the wrong things motivating us, they're always going to lead us in an unhealthy direction.
Yeah.
So if we can prioritize being motivated by what Jesus said matters most, which is a relationship with him, which is leading people to experiencing more of the life and life to the full that he calls us to. If that can be our motivation, then our rhythms change.
Mm-hmm.
Our pressure is released in a different way. What we're trying to produce is no longer the things that will tear us down and totally burn us out. We will be able to truly be not only the types of leaders that we want to be, but the examples of disciples of Christ that we're hoping to build in the next generation.
Okay, so what hangs in the balance of us all getting this right?
Everything. No,
Say more.
Everything hangs in the balance of us getting this right, because what ends up happening is burnout robs the people that you're ministering to of you. Like, if God has called you to a particular place, a particular setting, he's called you to the fullness of who you are. He's actually inviting you to become fully who you are in him. And you can't do that if you're allowing yourself to be worn down and completely burnt out. So you literally rob every teenager sitting in your ministry of all the things God is inviting you into to be for and with those people.
Yeah.
So good.
I missed third grade. Like, all of third grade, when my daughter was in third grade, I don't remember any of it, because we were going from 50 to 100 to 200 kids in a small church. Like, I had 200 middle schoolers coming. I'm like, holy cow. It was so much ministry. And yet my family, like, where's mom?
Yeah.
Mom's always gone. And my daughter's 24 now. It affected her faith. And you can't see that when you're in it, right? Because what you're doing is like caring for other people, and you're doing what God has called you to do. And then when you go home and shut the door, like, it's affecting your family, your spouse, your kids. And y'all, it is the hardest place to be, to hear your kid talk about how mom always chose other people, right? If you're just continually showing up for other people and you're never showing up for your own family, that's where you lose.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Thanks for sharing that, Charlie. I feel that deeply. I think every single person who's listening to this right now is at stake. And what I mean by that is we see far too many pastors burn out. We see far too many students left confused and wondering what happened because a youth pastor's suddenly gone. We see way too many children who feel like their parent hasn't been present. But I think all of that boils back to the leader who's listening to this. And if I'm just thinking about myself with my headphones on, listening to this episode, 5 or 10 years ago, I think I would have wanted somebody to say, hey, we can't afford to lose you.
Yeah.
Because who you are and the life that you were given is far more important than the ministry you're a part of, is far more important than any of the work you'll do or any of the results that you'll produce. Like, you were created for life and life to the full. Not just the students you lead, not just the volunteers that you're investing in, not just the people who will walk through the doors of your church on a weekly basis. You were created for that. And if you're not experiencing that type of life, then you're missing out on the very gift that you're trying to lead other people into experiencing day in and day out. And I'm just like, we can't afford to have pastors and leaders doing that anymore. It's happened for far too long, far too many decades, and in far too many situations. We've watched this play out. I mean, let's be really honest for a second. A lot of the moral failures we see, a lot of the scandals that we see, it's burnout. It is burnout showing itself in really unhealthy ways. We can't afford it anymore. So we can't burn out because the people who are leading it are at stake, but also because I believe the next generation is at stake in everything that we're talking about, and they're worth everything.
And if we don't model that for them, then we hand the keys of leadership of the church to a generation that's not equipped to make it better.
Exactly. Make it better.
Wow.
That's so important.
Yep.
So,
The idea is what you do matters, but who you are matters more.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And if we want to prevent burnout in our lives, we need to understand that who we are matters so much more than the sum total of our entire to-do list.
Yep.
thank you. Thank you all so much for what you shared. To all of you who are listening, thank you so much for joining us. If you are walking through a season of burnout, if you just now discovered, oh, that's what's going on with me, we just want to encourage you to keep going, to get the help that you need, to acknowledge what you're walking through, because we need you to stay in the game, because what you do matters and who you do it for matters. So we love you. We're here for you. And as you're processing all of this, if you're rethinking anything, please reach out. We would love to rethink it together.